No one noticed the children until it was almost too late. Not in a place where every table cost more than Emma Carter made in a week and every guest looked like they owned the city, but Emma noticed everything because she had to, because missing one detail meant losing her job, and losing her job meant not making rent this month, and she was already 2 weeks behind. Her feet aching in worn-out shoes as she balanced a silver tray through a sea of tailored suits and glittering gowns, her manager's voice still ringing in her ears. One more mistake and you're done. And she believed him. She had seen girls disappear for less, so she kept her head down, kept moving, until something pulled her gaze sideways, a quiet corner near the back where the light didn't quite reach, where 2 small figures sat too still, too silent, a boy and a girl, maybe 7 or 8, dressed too simply for a place like this, untouched plates in front of them, glasses of water that hadn't been refilled, and no one, not a single server, not a single guest, not even the host, seemed to see them, as if they didn't belong in the same world. And the boy leaned closer to the girl, his voice barely a whisper. Dad said we shouldn't be seen. And Emma felt something tighten in her chest, something familiar, something that reminded her of nights she had gone to bed hungry, pretending it didn't matter, pretending she didn't exist. And she looked around, expecting someone to step in, someone richer, braver, more important, but no one moved. Conversations flowed, laughter echoed, glasses clinked, life went on, and those children stayed invisible, and Emma knew she should walk away. She had been warned, she had been taught, don't get involved, don't break the rules, don't risk everything for strangers. But her hands were already moving, setting her tray down, picking up a plate that hadn't been touched, still warm, still perfect. And before she could stop herself, she walked toward them, each step louder in her ears than the music, until she reached their table and crouched down to their level, offering a small, careful smile. Hey, you guys hungry? And the girl looked at her like she had just broken some unspoken law, wide-eyed, uncertain, while the boy hesitated, then nodded slowly, and Emma slid the plate toward them, her voice softer now. It's okay, no one's going to mind. Even though she knew that wasn't true, even though she could already feel the weight of consequences building behind her. But the moment her fingers brushed the boy's hand, something strange happened, a sudden chill, sharp and fleeting, like touching ice that didn't melt, and her heart skipped, just for a second, enough to make her breath catch, and she pulled back slightly, searching his face. But he only looked at her with quiet gratitude, nothing dangerous, nothing wrong, just a child who had been waiting too long to be seen. And Emma exhaled, steadying herself, pushing the feeling aside, because whatever that was, it didn't matter, not compared to the way they ate, careful at first, then faster, like they had been taught not to expect kindness but couldn't stop themselves from hoping for it. And for a brief moment, in a room full of power and wealth and people who had everything, Emma Carter became the only person who chose to notice the ones who had nothing. And she didn't see the man standing in the shadows across the room, didn't feel the shift in the air as his attention locked onto her, didn't know that every movement she made was being watched with an intensity that could change her life forever. Because if she had looked up, if she had met those eyes, she might have understood that some acts of kindness don't go unnoticed, especially not by a king who had been watching all along. The moment the last bite disappeared from the plate, the room seemed to shift in a way Emma could not explain, not louder, not colder, just different. Like the air itself had started paying attention, and she felt it before she understood it, a subtle pressure at the back of her neck, the kind that made people turn around even when they told themselves not to. But Emma stayed focused on the children, offering a small napkin, her voice gentle. Slow down, you have got time. Even though she knew time was exactly what she did not have, because somewhere behind her heels clicked sharply against marble, fast, deliberate, and familiar. And her stomach dropped before she even looked up. Emma, her manager's voice cut through the soft music, tight and controlled, the kind of tone that meant trouble. What do you think you are doing? And every instinct told her to stand, to apologize, to step away, and pretend none of this had happened. But the girl beside her tugged lightly at her sleeve, eyes wide, not wanting her to leave. And that small touch anchored her in place stronger than fear ever could. So Emma straightened slowly, keeping her voice steady even as her hands trembled slightly. They had not been served, she said. Simple, honest, the truth she had always believed should be enough. But the manager's expression hardened, glancing at the children as if they were an inconvenience rather than guests. That is not your decision to make, he replied, lowering his voice as nearby conversations began to quiet. Curiosity spreading like ripples. These tables are reserved. You follow assignments, or you leave. And the word leave hung heavy between them. Heavier than any threat. Heavier than the rent notice folded in Emma's locker. And for a second, she almost gave in. Almost stepped back. Almost let the system work exactly as it always had. But then she looked at the children again, at the way the boy subtly shielded his sister, at the way they both seemed prepared to disappear the moment they were told to. And something inside her refused, quietly but firmly. I can fix it, she said instead, a compromise that was not really a compromise at all. I will cover the cost. Even though she had no idea how she would, even though she knew it might take her weeks to recover from one meal. But dignity, even borrowed dignity, mattered, and the manager let out a short, disbelieving breath, ready to argue, ready to escalate, when another presence entered the moment, not loud, not forceful, but undeniable, a silence that spread outward like a shadow, and people began to notice, not because anyone announced it, but because conversations stopped mid-sentence, glasses hovered in the air, and every head turned in the same direction as if pulled by an invisible thread. And Emma felt it again, that pressure, stronger now, closer, and before she could turn fully, a voice spoke, calm, measured, carrying effortlessly across the room without needing to be raised. Is there a problem? And it was not a question anyone rushed to answer, because the man who stepped forward did not look like someone who needed explanations. He looked like someone who already knew them, tall, composed, dressed in black that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it, his presence quiet but absolute. And the manager straightened immediately, all authority draining from his posture. Sir, it is just a misunderstanding, he said quickly, too quickly, while Emma remained where she was, caught between standing and kneeling, unsure whether to move or stay still, and the man's gaze shifted, not to the manager, not to the crowd, but directly to her. And for a brief second the world narrowed to that single point of contact, his eyes unreadable yet impossibly intense, as if measuring something deeper than what he could see. And then, almost imperceptibly, his attention flickered to the children, taking in the half-empty plate, the quiet gratitude, the small details no one else had cared to notice. And when he spoke again, his voice was softer, but somehow even more powerful. Then I suggest, he said slowly, that the misunderstanding ends here. And no one argued, not the manager, not the staff, not a single guest, because something in his tone made it clear that this was not a suggestion at all. And Emma, still unaware of who he truly was, felt the ground beneath her shift in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the realization that the moment she chose kindness over safety, she had stepped into a world where every choice carried consequences she could not yet see. And somewhere deep inside, that same strange chill from before lingered, not as a warning, but as the quiet beginning of something far greater than she had ever imagined. Emma did not move even after the room settled, even after the manager stepped back and the tension seemed to dissolve into something quieter but far more dangerous, because the man in black was still there, still watching, and there was something in his presence that made everything else feel distant, smaller, like the world had shifted its center without asking permission, and she became painfully aware of every detail, the faint hum of the overhead lights, the soft clink of a glass somewhere far away, the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat that refused to calm down. And when she finally found her voice, it came out softer than she intended. I did not mean to cause trouble. And for a brief second she thought she had made a mistake speaking at all, but his gaze did not harden, did not dismiss her. It lingered, thoughtful, as if her words mattered more than they should, and that alone was enough to unsettle her, because people like him did not listen to people like her, not in places like this, not in a world built on invisible lines she had learned never to cross. And yet here she was, standing directly in his path, holding his attention in a way she could not explain. while beside her the children had gone completely still, their earlier hunger replaced by something quieter, almost cautious, the boy lowering his eyes, the girl clutching the edge of the table as if waiting for something to happen, and the man noticed, of course he noticed, his expression shifting just slightly, not softer, not warmer, but different, as if something unseen had clicked into place, and he stepped closer, not rushed, not hesitant, each movement controlled, deliberate, the space between them closing until Emma could feel the faint drop in temperature that followed him, subtle but undeniable, like standing too close to an open window on a winter night. An instinct told her to step back, to create distance, but she did not because she was brave, but because the children were still behind her, and leaving now would feel like abandoning them. And that was something she could not do, not anymore, not after everything she had already risked, so she stayed, meeting his gaze even as doubt crept in, even as her mind raced through every possible consequence she had just invited into her life. And then he spoke again, quieter this time, but somehow reaching her more clearly than before. You chose to help them. Not a question, not an accusation, just a statement. And Emma nodded slowly, unsure what answer he expected. They needed someone, she replied, the simplest truth she had. And for a moment nothing happened, no reaction, no judgment, just silence stretching between them, until he exhaled softly, almost imperceptibly, as if releasing something he had been holding for far longer than this moment. And when he turned slightly toward the children, his voice changed in a way that made Emma's breath catch, not because it was louder or sharper, but because it carried something deeper, something protective. You should not have been left alone, he said, and the boy looked up then, hesitant, searching his face with a recognition that did not quite reach Emma yet, something unspoken passing between them, something she could feel but not understand. And it was in that moment, watching the way the room seemed to bend around him, the way every person nearby kept their distance without being told, the way the air itself seemed to listen when he spoke, that Emma realized she was no longer standing in a normal situation, no longer dealing with a difficult guest or an upset manager. She was standing at the edge of something much larger, something she had unknowingly stepped into the moment she decided to care. And as the man's attention returned to her once more, steady and unwavering, she felt that same strange chill from before, stronger now, no longer fleeting, but rooted, as if something had already begun to connect them in ways she could not yet see. And deep down, beneath the fear and the uncertainty, a single thought surfaced, quiet but undeniable, that whatever came next, there was no going back to the life she had before. The silence that followed his words did not feel empty. It felt heavy, like something unseen had just settled over the room, and Emma could feel it pressing against her chest, making every breath slower, deeper, more deliberate, while the children remained still beside her, no longer uncertain, no longer invisible, but waiting, as if they had been here before, as if they understood something she did not. And the boy finally spoke, his voice small but steady. We did not want to cause trouble. And the man's gaze softened in a way that was almost imperceptible, but real, unmistakably real. You did not, he replied, and for the first time there was something in his tone that did not belong to power or control, something quieter, something closer to reassurance. And Emma felt her shoulders loosen just slightly, though the tension had not left entirely, because nothing about this situation was normal. Nothing about him was normal, and the realization was beginning to take shape in her mind, not as a clear answer, but as a growing awareness that she was standing in front of someone who did not simply command respect. He defined it, and the way the staff kept their distance, the way her manager avoided eye contact, the way the entire room seemed to orbit around him without acknowledgement. It all pointed to something she had only ever heard about in whispers, stories she had dismissed as exaggeration, rumors meant to explain things people could not understand. And yet here he was, real, undeniable, and focused entirely on her. And that was the part she could not reconcile. Why her? Why this moment? Why something as small as a shared meal had drawn his attention so completely? And before she could find the courage to ask, to say anything at all, he stepped closer to the children, lowering himself just enough to meet their eyes, his movements precise, controlled, but carrying a familiarity that shifted everything. And the girl looked at him differently now, not with fear, not with uncertainty, but with something softer, something that made Emma's breath catch again, because she recognized that look, the quiet trust children reserved for someone who belonged to them, someone they had been waiting for, and the boy's voice followed, hesitant but certain. You came. And those two words seemed to change the air entirely, because the man did not deny it, did not question it. He simply nodded once, and Emma felt the ground beneath her understanding shift, the pieces aligning in a way she had not expected, could not have expected, and suddenly the way he had watched them, the way he had intervened without hesitation, the way the room had responded to his presence, it all pointed to a truth that sent a chill deeper than anything she had felt before. Not fear, not exactly, but the realization that she had stepped into something far beyond her world, far beyond anything she could walk away from. And her voice came out quieter now, almost involuntary. You know them. And he turned back to her, his expression unreadable once more, that brief softness gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by something ancient, something controlled. I do, he said, and there was no hesitation, no explanation, just certainty. And Emma's mind raced, trying to catch up, trying to make sense of a reality that refused to fit into anything she understood. And for a moment she thought about stepping back, about creating distance, about reminding herself that none of this was her place, that she could still walk away before it went any further. But then the girl reached for her hand. Again, small fingers wrapping around hers with quiet trust. And Emma stayed, because leaving now would feel like turning her back on something that mattered, something she could not yet name, but could already feel. And as the man straightened once more, his presence filling the space without effort, his gaze settling on her with a weight that felt almost like a decision being made, Emma realized that whatever had begun in this moment, whatever invisible line she had crossed, it was no longer just about the children, and it was no longer something she could pretend not to be part of. Emma felt it before he said anything. That shift again, subtle but absolute, like the moment before a storm changes direction, and the way his gaze held hers made it clear that whatever decision he was about to make, it included her whether she understood it or not. And that realization should have frightened her more than anything else in that room. But instead it rooted her in place, because the girl's hand was still wrapped around hers, small and warm, and the boy had stepped just slightly closer, not to the man, but to her, as if she had somehow become part of their safety without meaning to. And the man noticed that too. Of course he noticed everything, his eyes lowering briefly to where their hands touched before returning to Emma's face, measuring, considering, as if trying to understand something that did not fit into his world. And when he finally spoke again, his voice carried that same quiet authority, but there was something else beneath it now, something almost curious. What is your name? And the question caught her off guard. Simple, ordinary, completely out of place in a moment that felt anything but normal. And for a second she hesitated, not because she did not want to answer, but because names felt important here in a way they had never been before, like giving him that piece of herself might mean more than she could take back. But the silence stretched, and she knew not answering would only make things worse, so she lifted her chin slightly, steadying her voice. Emma, she said. Then after a brief pause, Emma Carter. And something flickered in his expression. Not recognition exactly, but acknowledgement, as if the name itself had weight now that he knew it, as if it had already been placed somewhere it could not be erased. And he repeated it once, quietly. Emma Carter, like he was testing how it sounded, like he was committing it to memory, and the way he said it sent that same strange chill through her again, deeper this time. No longer just a fleeting sensation, but something that lingered, something that connected, and she did not understand why. Did not understand how a name spoken by a stranger could feel like a door closing behind her, sealing her into something she had not chosen but could no longer avoid. And before she could gather her thoughts, before she could ask the question forming in her mind, the manager stepped forward again, hesitant now, careful, his earlier authority replaced with something closer to unease. Sir, if there is anything we can do to make this right, he began, but the man did not even look at him, did not acknowledge him at all, his focus remaining entirely on Emma, and that alone was enough to silence the rest of the room, because it made one thing clear to everyone watching. Whatever this situation was, it no longer belonged to the restaurant. It belonged to him. and Emma felt the weight of that realization settle over her as he spoke again. Calm, decisive. You have already done enough. And she was not sure if he meant it as reassurance or something else entirely, because the way his gaze lingered suggested that what she had done was not small, not forgettable, not something that could be brushed aside and forgotten once the night ended. And then he turned slightly, his attention shifting to the children once more, his posture changing just enough to signal that something was about to happen, something final, and the boy looked up at him with quiet expectation, the girl tightening her grip on Emma's hand for just a second longer before slowly letting go. And that small release felt heavier than anything else that had happened so far, because it marked a change Emma could not undo. A moment where the connection she had formed was no longer hers to hold. And as the man extended his hand toward the children, not commanding, not forceful, simply there, Emma understood without being told that they would follow him, that wherever he was taking them was somewhere they belonged in a way she never could. And yet as they stepped toward him, the boy glanced back at her one last time, his expression soft but certain, as if silently acknowledging something she had given them that could not be taken away. And Emma stood there, watching, her heart still racing, her mind still trying to catch up, as the man who had just changed everything turned back to her once more, his voice quieter now, but no less final. This is not the last time we will meet. And it was not a promise, not exactly, but it carried the weight of inevitability. And as he guided the children away, the space they left behind felt colder, emptier, but not because they were gone, because Emma knew, deep down, that whatever had started tonight was far from over the moment he walked away, the room. Exhaled, not loudly, not all at once, but in small, careful breaths, like people were afraid to break whatever had just happened, and Emma stood exactly where he left her, her hands empty now, the warmth of the girl's grip fading slowly, replaced by that same strange chill that refused to leave. And for a second she wondered if she had imagined everything, if exhaustion had blurred the edges of reality just enough to make a simple act feel larger than it was. But the way people avoided her gaze told a different story. The way her manager did not speak, did not scold, did not even approach her again, told her that something had changed, something she could not undo. And as she forced herself to move, to pick up the abandoned tray, to return to the rhythm she knew so well, nothing felt the same. The music sounded distant, the lights too bright, the conversations hollow, like she had stepped out of one world and into another without realizing when the line had been crossed. And every step she took felt heavier, slower, as if part of her was still standing in that corner, still holding on to a moment that refused to let go. And she tried to focus, tried to remind herself that she needed this job, that rent was due in 4 days, that real life did not pause for strange encounters and unanswered questions. But her mind kept replaying it, the way he said her name, the way he looked at her like she mattered, like what she did had weight beyond a simple meal. And that thought unsettled her more than anything else, because people like him did not notice people like her. They passed through lives without leaving a trace, and yet he had stopped, had spoken, had made it clear that this was not the end, and the idea lingered, growing stronger with every passing minute, until it became impossible to ignore. And just as she was beginning to steady herself, beginning to convince herself that maybe it would all fade by morning, that maybe this would become just another story, she told herself to get through long shifts and longer nights. A quiet voice interrupted her thoughts. Close, careful. He never does that. And Emma turned to find one of the senior servers standing a few feet away, her expression unreadable, somewhere between curiosity and something else Emma could not quite place. Does what? Emma asked, though part of her already knew the answer, and the woman hesitated for a moment before stepping closer, lowering her voice just enough to keep it between them. Intervene, she said, glancing toward the entrance where he had disappeared. Not for anyone. And the words settled heavily, confirming what Emma had already begun to suspect, that whatever had happened tonight was not normal, not expected, and definitely not something that could be brushed aside. And she swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. Who is he? She asked quietly, and the woman's reaction was immediate, a quick glance around, a subtle shift in posture, as if even asking the question carried risk. And when she finally answered, her voice dropped even lower, almost a whisper. You really do not know. And Emma shook her head, because if she had known, if she had understood even a fraction of what she was stepping into, maybe she would have made a different choice, or maybe she would have done the same thing anyway. She could not tell anymore, and the woman studied her for a long second before speaking again, each word measured, deliberate. That was Lucian Voss, and the name alone seemed to change the air again, heavier, colder, filled with something ancient and unspoken, and Emma felt it settle deep in her chest, not as fear exactly, but as recognition that she had crossed into a world where names carried power, where actions had consequences far beyond what she could see. And as the realization took hold, one thought rose above all the others, clear and undeniable. That when Lucian Voss said they would meet again, it was not a possibility. It was a certainty, and no matter how much she tried to return to her normal life, some part of her already knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Emma did not sleep that night. Not really. Even after her shift ended and the city outside had gone quiet. Even after she walked the familiar 3 blocks to her apartment, counting every step like she always did, passing flickering streetlights and closed storefronts. That felt safer than the world she had just left behind, because nothing about that night stayed where it was supposed to. It followed her, settled into her thoughts, replaying in fragments she could not control. The children's eyes, the way they had trusted her without question, the way they had looked at him with something deeper than recognition, and most of all, the way he had said her name, like it meant something, like it belonged somewhere she had never been before, and she told herself it did not matter, that people like Lucian Voss did not cross paths with people like her twice, that whatever he meant, whatever he saw, it would fade the moment he returned to his world, but the certainty in his voice refused to leave her. It lingered, quiet but unshakable, and by morning her exhaustion had settled into something sharper, something restless, the kind that made every sound feel louder, every moment heavier. And when she stepped back into the restaurant that evening, everything felt different, not visibly, not in a way anyone could point to, but she noticed it immediately, the way conversations lowered when she walked by, the way a few of the staff glanced at her, then quickly looked away, the way her manager barely spoke to her at all, as if he was unsure how to treat her now, and that uncertainty unsettled her more than anger ever could, because it meant something had shifted in ways she could not see, could not control, and she tried to ignore it, tried to fall back into routine, taking orders, carrying trays, focusing on the details she could manage, but her mind refused to settle, every shadow catching her attention, every reflection making her glance twice, and for a moment, she wondered if she was waiting for him, if some part of her expected him to appear again like he had before, silent and inevitable, and she pushed the thought away immediately, because that was dangerous, because expecting anything from someone like him was a mistake she could not afford. And yet as the hours passed, the feeling did not fade. It grew, quiet but persistent, like something was approaching just beyond her awareness. And it was not until the front doors opened again, later than usual, the kind of late that meant only a certain kind of guest would arrive, that the entire room seemed to react at once, subtle but immediate, the same shift she had felt before, the same quiet tension settling over everything. And Emma did not need to look to know who had walked in. She felt it in the air, in the way her pulse quickened without warning, in the way the room seemed to hold its breath, and for a second she stayed where she was, her back turned, her hands tightening around the edge of the tray she carried, because turning around meant confirming what she already knew, meant stepping back into something she had not been able to leave behind. And when she finally did turn, slowly, carefully, her eyes found him almost immediately, as if there had never been a question of where he would be, and he was already looking at her, not scanning the room, not acknowledging the staff or the guests, just her, as if the rest of the world did not exist, and the weight of that gaze hit harder this time, not unfamiliar anymore, but no less intense, and for a brief moment everything else faded, the noise, the movement, the reality she had been clinging to, until it was just that. Connection, steady and undeniable. And then he took a single step forward, not rushed, not hesitant, and Emma understood without needing words that whatever had begun the night before was not over. It had only just started, and this time there would be no stepping back, no pretending it had not happened, because when Lucian Voss decided something, it did not end quietly. It changed everything. Emma did not realize she had stopped breathing until he was standing directly in front of her again. Close enough that the quiet intensity around him felt almost tangible, like the air itself had weight, and her fingers tightened slightly around the tray she still held, grounding herself in something real, something familiar, because nothing about him felt familiar. Nothing about the way he looked at her felt ordinary. And yet there was no hostility in his gaze, no impatience. Just that same focused attention that made everything else disappear, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The silence stretching between them, filled with something unspoken, something that felt less like coincidence and more like inevitability. And it was him who broke it first, his voice low, controlled, carrying easily without needing to rise. "You came back," and the words caught her off guard. Simple, but loaded in a way she could not immediately understand, as if there had been a possibility she would not, as if her presence here mattered more than it should, and she found herself answering before she could think it through. "I work here." Her tone softer than she intended, steady but cautious, and something shifted in his expression again. Not quite amusement, not quite approval, but close enough to make her chest tighten unexpectedly. "Of course you do," he replied, and the way he said it made it sound like more than a fact, like a piece of a larger picture he was already assembling. And Emma felt that same quiet unease return, the sense that she was being seen in a way she did not fully understand, and before she could respond, before she could ask why he had come back, why he was standing here instead of anywhere else in the room, two small figures appeared at his side, silent but unmistakable, and her breath caught as she recognized them immediately. Noah and Lily, no longer hidden in the shadows, no longer ignored, but standing beside him as if they had always belonged there. And the difference was impossible to miss. Their posture steadier, their eyes clearer, the quiet uncertainty from before replaced with something more grounded, something that looked a lot like safety. And Lily gave her a small, hesitant smile, the kind that carried recognition and gratitude, without needing words. And Emma felt something warm push through the lingering tension, something that reminded her why she had acted in the first place, why she had chosen to step in when no one else did. And Lucian noticed that too. Of course he did, his gaze shifting briefly between them, taking in the connection that had formed in such a short time. And when he spoke again, his voice carried a different weight now, not just authority, but intention. "They asked to see you." And that was enough to still her completely, because it meant this was not random, not a passing moment that had already ended. It meant she had stayed with them, somehow, even after they left, and she struggled for a response. Her thoughts catching up slowly. "They are okay," she said instead, the question hidden inside the statement. And Lucian nodded once, a simple gesture that somehow carried more reassurance than anything else in the room. "They are," he confirmed, and then his attention returned to her fully, steady, unwavering. "But that is not why I am here." And the words settled heavily, shifting the moment again, deeper this time, more serious. And Emma felt her pulse quicken as the weight of what he was implying began to take shape. Because if he had come back, if he had brought them with him, if he was standing here again with that same certainty in his gaze, then this was no longer about a single act of kindness. It was about something else, something she had unknowingly stepped into. And as she met his eyes, unable to look away even if she wanted to, she realized that whatever he was about to say next would not just change the rest of her shift, it would change everything that came after. Emma felt the shift before he finished speaking. The way the air seemed to settle into something final, something that could not be undone once it was said, and she held his gaze even as her pulse quickened, even as every instinct told her that whatever came next would pull her deeper into a world she did not belong to. And yet she did not step back, not this time, because part of her already understood that stepping back would not change anything, not anymore. And Lucian Voss watched her carefully, as if measuring that exact realization, as if confirming something he had already decided. And when he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, but carried more weight than anything he had said so far. "What you did yesterday," he began, his eyes flickering briefly toward Noah and Lily before returning to her, "was not small." And Emma swallowed, unsure how to respond, because to her it had been simple, necessary, the only choice she could live with. But the way he said it made it sound like something else entirely, something rare, something that had consequences she had not considered, and he continued without waiting for an answer. Most people saw them and chose not to act, and there was no accusation in his tone, just a statement of fact that hung heavier than judgment. You did, and the silence that followed felt different this time. Not uncertain, not tense, but deliberate, as if everything was leading to a single point, a single decision, and Emma felt it settle in her chest before he said the next words, before he made it real. I do not ignore that. And something in the way he said it made it clear that this was not just gratitude, not just acknowledgement. It was something deeper, something tied to who he was in a way she was only beginning to understand. And her voice came out quieter now, careful. You do not have to do anything, she said, because that was the truth she knew. Kindness was not meant to be exchanged, not meant to be repaid. But Lucian's expression did not change, his gaze steady, unwavering. I decide what I have to do, he replied, and there was no arrogance in it. No need to prove anything, just certainty, absolute and unshakable. And Emma felt the weight of that certainty press against her, because it meant this was not a conversation she could steer, not a situation she could control, and yet she stayed, because leaving now would feel like denying something that had already taken root, and Lucian took a single step closer, closing the last of the distance between them, his presence filling the space without effort. Emma Carter, he said again, her name slower this time, deliberate, as if marking the moment. You stepped into my world the moment you chose them. And the words sent that familiar chill through her, deeper now, no longer strange but inevitable, and she realized then that this was not about a restaurant, not about a single night. It was about a line she had crossed without knowing it existed, and there was no path back to where she had been before, and Lucian's gaze did not waver as he finished. And in my world, he continued, his voice soft but absolute, kindness is not forgotten, and the meaning behind those words settled into her slowly, not as a threat, not as a promise she could easily understand, but as something in between, something that would unfold whether she was ready or not. And for a moment neither of them moved, the noise of the restaurant fading into the background once more, leaving only the weight of what had been said. And Emma felt it clearly then, the shift in her life, quiet but irreversible, like a door closing behind her without a sound. And as she stood there, caught between the world she knew and the one she had just entered, a single thought surfaced, steady and undeniable, that even the coldest kings do not overlook kindness, and when they notice it, nothing ever stays the same again.